Roommates don't respect my boundaries. I get them evicted in less than a day. I don't know if this is pro. It's certainly more than petty. Also, I apologize for any formatting. I'm on mobile and my first time posting any sort of longer story. Also sorry for the long post. Background is pretty important. TLDR at the bottom. My freshman year of college I went through a long process with my school to be able to live off campus as a freshman. Normally this is not allowed, but they made an exception due to circumstances. I moved in on a lease takeover as a girl to an all-boy apartment. It was a 4-bedroom apartment that individually leased each room, but 2 rooms shared 1 bath and all shared a kitchen, living room and laundry room. This place was gross when I moved in, but I cleaned it up and got it livable enough. I grew up with brothers and had no problem with dudes as long as they were decently respectful. Plus I had the kitchen to myself. I'm also an engineering student and asked them if they had their friends over to let me know beforehand or keep the music below bed rattling. Turns out, this exact apartment was known as the party apartment, and I would soon find out why. I was working 8 to 12-hour shifts at retail and then going to school full-time. I come home at 11 p.m. exhausted to blasting music and so many people there streaming out a front door. I was pissed. Luckily each room locks with a deadbolt and I remembered to lock mine before I left for work. There were easily 50 people there. As a 20-year-old who just wanted to sleep, I did the only rational thing I could do. I packed an overnight bag, locked my room and called a friend with an SOS and slept there. I find out later that one of my roommates was dealing. Only 3 people were of legal drinking age and 1 girl was 14. The GF of one of my roommates was still in HS and invited all of her friends who invited more people. The cops busted the party but luckily didn't card anyone, so no one was arrested. Now I felt like I could still reasonably deal with this. Then they started to use my things in the kitchen, steal my food, and the last straw was when they dented my kitchen knives that I had just purchased. Brand new knives that now had nicks in the blade like they sword fought with them. Mind you, I communicated all of my grievances that weren't super minor, like using my laundry soap, with them and asked that my boundaries be respected. Their guests would throw up and poop in the toilet. They would try to enter my room to use my bed while I was sleeping. The GF of one even ended up coming into my room to stare at me. I woke up when I forgot to lock my door to tell me 4 people were coming over. My food and my items were still being taken and damaged, and I grew tired of it all. I attempted to befriend the various roommates in an effort to get them to be more courteous. But the information I got was even better. Remember how I was a lease takeover? Yeah, our apartment not only required the necessary paperwork, they also required a lease takeover fee. I find out that my roommates are friends of the people on the lease. Their friends upgraded to a different apartment complex and didn't want to pay that fee. My roommates hadn't paid the takeover fee or signed any paperwork putting them on the lease, so the original leaseholder wasn't living there. I keep this information for later. A few weeks pass and the parties are smaller, but still happening. Then one day I am discussing painting my room due to the marks on the walls from the previous tenants. Our apartment allowed you to paint if it was 1 approved first or 2. You painted it back before move out. The maintenance guys were super sweet and let me pick a custom color for my room. A pretty light sky blue. Bought it for me, and helped me paint my room. My roommates find out I painted and ask about it, not knowing what would happen later. They didn't paint their room. They spray painted it, not with any vulgar or even gang symbols, but spray painted it. The parties continued, but now they let their guests sign the walls in various Sharpies. This was the moment I realized was the time. I ended up taking pictures of the room on Snapchat and saved them to my camera roll. I knew that my apartment complex wouldn't do anything about the parties and could even blame me for the underage kids, plus the items I stored in the common areas were fair game according to legal terms about a shared space. I first speak with the building manager about the parties. I was right. There isn't anything I can do but call the cops. I can complain all I want about the condition of the house my roommates causing the theft and damage of my belongings, and they won't do anything. They didn't even seem bothered when I spoke to them about 2/4 of us living there not being on the lease. The other one that was on my side was chill and I didn't have a problem with, as long as rent was paid on time. It seemed they weren't going to do anything. After all this, I pull out my camera roll and tell this nice lady to scroll as long as she wants, as I took about 15 pictures on just the one room. She gets mad and starts babbling on and on about gang graffiti, and she won't have it. I knew there were no gang symbols whatsoever on the walls. Just dumb kids, but it didn't look good. I didn't correct her and reminded her that the rooms in question were the ones where they weren't even legal tenants here. I locked as much as I could remember to grab of my things from the kitchen in my bedroom beforehand, and was headed straight to work, so I didn't get to see the devastation as 2 office workers evict them in hours. They weren't the legal tenants and had clearly stayed over the 7-day guest limit. They had to pack up as much as they could and were out by the time I got home from my shift 10 hours later. I got a lot of hateful and threatening messages from the GF of one of them. I don't remember the exact words as this was a few years ago, 2016, and I didn't save it for more than a year. I did save them once she started threatening me with stalking and physical harm. I stayed polite and neutral in my responses in case I would need to take them to court. They did get one small revenge in that I remember to lock up my pots, but in my hurry I forgot the lids. They stole my lids to all cookware, even my crock pot. They also took all my food they could grab and put it in the now topless crock pot with all of my spices too, and left it on. I'm not sure what liquid was used and I don't ever want to know. But I ended up paying the rent of a 1-bedroom for 4 bedrooms when the last roommate's lease ended a few months later. The rooms were leased individually. Also, the now former roommate's friends that were on the lease had to come and clean and repaint the walls white. Do you know what happens when you put water-based white paint over a red and black colored permanent marker? He eventually hired a guy to make it look right. I heard it took 9+ layers in some areas and others were entirely spackled. That's not right, but it was a special paint that wouldn't let the ink from the marker bleed through over and was super thick. I felt bad for the original leaseholders as they were now stuck with the damages. Had to repaint and still had to pay rent on this apartment. I had met with and was cool with them. Even tried helping one guy paint a bunch and told him I had no beef with him. I apologized the way things worked out and he wasn't happy with me but also didn't blame me. I reasoned it they knew they were breaking the terms of their lease and exactly who their friends were when they didn't transfer the lease. If they hadn't repainted the room the way they did, the complex manager wouldn't have done anything. TLDR, my roommates don't respect me or my belongings, so I take the time to befriend them and use what I learned to get them evicted. They had to move in a matter of hours. Edit 1. I got a few comments. The title was my TLDR. First of all, don't wanna read. Don't click it. Secondly, I hope this one is better. Edit 2. Someone made an excellent point that the bathroom is the most obvious place to dispose of human waste. My point that I didn't get across was that there was no flushing involved and a few times several people's worth of excrement and or vomit would be in the toilet when I returned home. Plunging would work sometimes, other times the clog would have to be removed manually. Since it was my half of the apartment, I had to remove the clog before I could do my business. Not the best thing to see first thing in the morning. You have to use kills to paint over markers. It reeks, but it also wipes out mold and stuff. Might file that for if you ever buy a home that is painted strong colors. We owned a rental. The tenants had a lease to buy deal, so we let the treat it as if they owned it. Then one went to grad school and they backed out. Had to hire a painter and his first coat was kills to cover up the string colors. You have to wonder, were these savages raised by wild boars? They were old enough to know better. My older brother had friends who did graffiti bombs and murals and let them go wild on his bedroom wall. My father made him fix it, and it took coat after coat and the crap underneath kept coming through. I remember him trying primer instead of regular paint and still failing to cover it. I had a girlfriend who decided to paint her apartment walls bright pink one day. She didn't know anything about taping off the edges, so her carpet and her ceiling all had a pink border from the rollers she used. As someone who grew up helping my parents paint several house interiors, I assumed everyone knew how to lay down masking tape. It drove me nuts every time I was at her place. In my state, it wouldn't matter if they've been there 30 days, they would have to start eviction procedures, and probably could go after the original leaseholders. I would not envy you in 30+ days of torment as the eviction plays out. Glad you're somewhere more reasonable, or I suspect you just had dumbass roommates. This revenge sounds pro to me, but if you're unsure, you can always post it over at our regular revenge. Acetone nail polish remover takes permanent marker off of everything. Don't put it on plastic though. It'll dissolve it. As a minister and someone who does home renovation, I would surmise that the first attempts to cover the offending paint didn't work because they underestimated the extent of the damage. They might have even tried to save a bit of money by stretching out the amount of latex with a bit of water. They hopefully learned a valuable lesson. Repaint, and then no more. You kinda sound like Mr. I Saw What My Hero Academia at the party part. YTA.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.